prettiest ports in the country is right in our own backyard. But once we make way for those huge ships to sail in, what happens to the muck that we spend so much time and money dredging out?
It's the same sediment that's addressed in a law that passed earlier this month, the Water Resources Reform and Development Act of 2014. It means some of the projects reusing silt from our waterways can expand. It's not your typical construction site. They're not breaking ground. Quite the contrary, they're building it up.
The entire island is built out of dredge material from the shipping channels kind of leading up to the Port of Baltimore.
Megan Garrett is no stranger to Poplar Island, a project going on 16 years and still in the works.
This is your office. You know, you get to see wildlife, birds flying by, see little animals, muskrats running on the ground. It's a wonderful experience. It's absolutely beautiful, beautiful, and it's very hard to imagine that this was man-made because it just looks so natural.
Project manager Justin Callahan first came to see the island back in the early 90s. Plans in the beginning stages to bring a speck of what once was back to life.
There were just a handful of remnants, maybe totaling an area of about 3 to 5 acres. And today, as it sits right now, the footprint of the island is about 1,140 acres.
As you see it now, the shoreline is about equal to what it looked like in 1847. Time and weather would erode the site to virtually nothing.
One of the questions that we get all the time from visitors is, the island had eroded to 3 to 5 acres, back in the 1990s. What would stop that from happening again? Well, the main difference here is that we've armored the shoreline.
Armored the shoreline with boulders, protecting what was once sediment at the bottom of our waterways.
We are using what would be considered to be a spoil, dredge material, and we're actually converting it into a much-needed habitat in the Chesapeake Bay, remote island habitat.
A man-made remote island habitat made up of the dredged sediment from the bay approach channels to the Port of Baltimore.
Green is good. That's what I always say.
For Bob Lama, it's a project he knows well.
So this all was open water that we're standing on?
Yes, ma'am. Open water.
He played a main role in reusing clean dredge material from the Susquehanna to rebuild Battery Island.
This is just material from farm fields that are coming down anyway. You may as well use it. Its purpose is it's clean material.
Battery Island's 11 acres are just a fraction compared to Poplar's more than 1,100. But they've got the same idea.
You've seen a poplar, what they do, they pump it in those cells, they let it drain, they move it with dozers, and they keep pumping, and they get to a certain point, then they sculpt it. We got to do it all at the same time.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
While we're pumping, we got to sculpt it. When they're finished in 2 months, that's it.
The dredge was out in the channel, and there was a pipeline that ran from the dredge to the island. We would pump in certain locations and bring the elevation up and then use dozers to actually shape the island.
Sediment from the waterways covered Battery Island by April of 2013. Then came the planting. Unlike Poplar Island, this site is exposed. No rock armor shielding the shoreline.
This is unconfined, no protection at all except the plants. Rationale, we don't have the money.
But that didn't stop them from turning Susquehanna silt into a wildlife sanctuary. Not far off the shore, a separate island towers in the water. More or less a dumping site, Blama says, from the 70s.
It was just dredge material, just dumped in there and piled up. Because what we wanted to do is create wildlife habitat. We didn't want it to just pile up.
After all, if the ships continue to come in, dredging doesn't stop.
If we don't dredge it, they have to light load their barges, which means they may have to build the barge halfway up. So it's economical. So almost all our dredging has to do with economics.
It's incredibly important for a number of reasons. One, you're actually beneficially using this dredge material to create much-needed habitat in the Chesapeake Bay. And two, quite simply, you're keeping the channels to and from the Port of Baltimore open for business.
As we dig deeper for bigger ships, it's the muck that's bringing new life to animals that come here.
Definitely a lot of work, but you can look around and see it's wonderful habitat for the birds, the fish. We have terrapins, all different kinds of animals just living within the marshes.
And the islands that once were. To date, there are 177 acres of tidal marsh completed at Poplar Island. The group was authorized for an expansion of an additional 575 acres. They're hoping to work on that project between 2016 through 2018.